In other videos, we cover creating shells using the drawing grid, and we cover things like proper shell geometry and why we generally work with a mesh for finite element modeling. The purpose of this video is to cover some of the tools that are available in InterCalc 3D for creating multiple shells all at once. What we'll do is we'll start here on the Create tab and take a look at what's available in the Templates tool. Notice that there is a tool for creating rectangular shells and one for circular shells. The rectangular shells one is really simple. It just collects a number of shells in a certain direction at a certain dimension, along with insertion points and rotation. If we just leave the defaults and let it go ahead and generate, we can see that we quickly can generate a 5x5 mesh, and maybe that represents a wall. If I move over just a little bit and make some space here, I'll just come back into Create and then Templates and demonstrate this other one that is called Rectangular Tank. Again, I'll just use the default values, but this one collects dimensions and spacings in 3 directions. And we'll put our insertion point over here just so that we keep our tank off of our wall. And then if I pan, we can see that we've created a tank. Might be a little bit more clear if I come in and render that tank. And now we can see that it's got an open top and a solid bottom. So the templates can be really useful for generating multiple shells. Now I have one more shell created out here in space, and I'll use this one to show that on the Modify tab we do have a copy tool, and it is applicable to shells, but all it really does is copy the selected shell by a certain distance, so it's not terribly exciting. The better one to illustrate is the tool called Array. So if I select this one shell and then choose to create an array, I can tell it, for instance, to take 5 steps. The step size will be a 1/2 foot based on the size of the shell that I've created. And let's just generate this one in the Z direction. And then I can say OK. And there it creates the shells for us. So that was Modify Array. Now another tool that can be useful, and I'm just panning out to come to a member that I've created already in this model, is a tool called Revolve Members to Shells. So if I select this one member and then choose Modify, and then come over to Revolve, and then Members to Shells, I can tell this tool that I want to take 36 steps ranging from 0 to 360, in other words, for the full circle. And then I can say OK. And if I zoom out, we can get a bigger picture that what this did was take that one member and create 36 steps all the way around the origin. So in other words, it's revolving about the y-axis, and it creates 36 shells for us. So that one can be useful if you have cylindrical structures that you need to model. The other tool that we use is this one on the Modify menu called Submesh Shells. It works on the selected shell. So if we just pick one and then say submesh the shells, I've studied this one a little bit. I know what order the nodes work in, and I know that I can subdivide it into 10 steps in the first direction and 16 steps in the other direction. And that takes that one shell and breaks it into 160 individual shells. So those are useful, but perhaps the most useful tool that we have is on this advanced meshing tab, because this tool actually is flexible enough to allow us to create a mesh on things that aren't necessarily rectangular. So I'm going to clarify by turning off the rendering here, just to show that I've created a perimeter, and we can envision this as being an internal loop that might represent a hole. So on this advanced meshing tab, the first thing that I do is I need to create a region. So if I deselect the hole, but only select the outer perimeter, I can then use add region, give it a name. It collects some parameters having to do with the increments that we want it to consider for meshing. And then I can say, OK. And now I've created a region. It also gives us the opportunity to define holes within a region. So I can select those members and then say add a hole. It's going to be associated with the one and only region that I've defined. And I could say elevator. And then say OK. There are options to edit the regions and the holes, and plenty of other tools for creating finer lines of mesh dots or nodes at locations of interest. But for the purpose of our demo here, what we'll do is just click Generate Mesh. Some more controls over the fineness of the mesh, but we'll just let it do its thing. Some confirmations that it has split some members. And now we can see that the tool has meshed this area, and probably easiest to come back to quick render to see that it has omitted elements in the area that we defined as being a hole. So this is all available on the advanced meshing tool. Very handy for irregular shapes.